I call to order the regular meeting of our Police Commission on Monday, June 13th at 5:07 p.m. Let us start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yes.
How are you, sir?
The first item on, or the next item on our agenda is correspondence, but we do not have any. That is correct. Okay. Then moving on to the next item on our agenda, approval of minutes for the May 9th, 2022 regular meeting. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes of that meeting.
Do I have a second?
Maybe second.
Yes.
You could say.
I second it, because I was there. Any discussion, questions, concerns? All right, all in favor? Aye. Okay. Now the next item on our agenda, old business. Does anyone have any old business?
I do not.
Do you have any old business, Commissioner Wall? Okay. Then moving on to the next item of our agenda, reports. Starting with me, the chairperson. I have a couple items to report. The first is regarding the Accreditation Specialist. As you might remember, the Personnel Subcommittee sent us the job description, and there was some concern over who the person would report to and the name of that position that we were unfamiliar with. So we were able to work with the Personnel Subcommittee, and we have changed the language to the Police Chief's Designee, which is what various people recommended, and it was approved by the Personnel Subcommittee and then went on to the Board of Selectmen and was approved with them. The second item I wanted to mention.
If I can, who do you expect that person to report to?
So it depends on when the person is hired. Initially, it will probably be the deputy chief, and then it will be the lieutenant who has oversight over professional standards. Thank you. I was picturing a person and getting the last part.
All right, thank you. Well done.
The next item on our agenda, Tanisha is here. That's not the next item. I just got kerfuddled because Tanisha needs to be let in, please.
Can we start this meeting over?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like,
I'll remember the word standards.
and I'll remember what we're doing. This is ways and means.
Okay.
Do we have a town ways and means? I don't even really know precisely what that is. It sounds good on,
Just finance.
right? But specifically, how is it different than a finance committee? Okay,
Just a different thing.
just lots of extra words. Okay.
Then
I saw that on the Westwood ones, ways and means. Hello.
there she goes. Come on up.
Oh, right here.
No seat, oh, there you go. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Hi.
Hi, everybody.
How are you?
I'll give you a second. We said the pledge. We went through the correspondence. There was none. We approved the minutes for the May 9th, 2022 meeting. We had no old business, and I am now giving the chairperson's report. Okay. I already mentioned the Accreditation Specialist, who we were able to change the reporting, the person to whom the Accreditation Specialist report to the Chief's Designee, and it was approved by the Personnel Subcommittee as well as the Board of Selectmen. And then we were moving on to my second item of my chairperson's report, which is the staff study. As you recall, it went through it was approved in the budget. I reached out to the first selectman to see if we could get that rolling now. She was not sure if we could start before July 1st, as that's when the budget kicks in. But she's looking into it to see if we can have RFPs or estimates or whatever the proper term is to get people.
Yep.
So she's looking into it, but we might have to wait until July 1st. The next study I wanted to touch on is our facility study. The Tecton has met with the department as well as the commission, as well as the Board of Selectmen representatives, and so now we're waiting for several people to set up the next stage of the meeting. So we're waiting on that one.
Sounds like we're pretty good at that
Yeah, we're good.
part of the process.
The next item I wanted to mention was the Cadet Program. They had their end of year send off last week. Commissioner Long and I were both there. They did a fantastic job. I have the pamphlet brochure if you want to look at it. And one thing I wanted to mention is that cadets as well as parents mentioned how much they appreciated that program. And I don't know if it was the parent to the kid because I'm not sure who matched up, but I heard from both a cadet as well as a parent that they were grateful because they thought their cadet could end up on the other side of law and order, and that this program really helped them kind of turn things around. So it was a good program. I don't know if you want to add anything.
I just would like to really know more about how this is funded. Volunteer contribution, how does it get paid for?
So most of the activities are funded by volunteers, or charity people donating to the program. So we will use some of the funds that have been donated to community services in general. We use some of those. Some funds are donated directly to the cadet program, and then there are sometimes where we put in some of our budget, but otherwise it's been funded through those means. And in the past, every year the cadets go to an academy, a week-long academy, and it's very expensive. In the past, a local bank has done some significant donations to that.
Is there like an annual budget, or could there be one? I mean, I'd be happy to federal out of the community and get some funds, but maybe you have to public into something to entice people. So, because I think it's a great program. Obviously, it's part of our community policing, in action. And I'd like to see it succeed and grow. Particularly the academy part of it, which I understand is almost $2,000 a day.
No, I think it's
I have in my head that something was like 600.
like 600 today.
Okay. They have nothing, it might as well be, so I'd like to have some more information on that. And Mike, because I think it deserves our backing, and it deserves the community's support. It's a great program.
And then the Cadet Academy used to be local at the University of Hartford, and it was nice when we could spend some time there and see it in action. It was really quite an event.
Like their helicopters and
Yeah,
dogs.
and they have scenarios, and they compete, and they're graded on how well they perform like a scenario with teams, and they set up a little mock police station, and there are cadets there that are running, and they're dispatching people. It's like they call that the police department right there, and everybody has to report there and roll call. It's really quite an amazing event.
Well, I would like for our cadets to have that opportunity because it was a really good program. I was pleasantly, I expected it to be good, and I was glad that it was.
Yeah, it had to disappear during it, but other than that.
Oh yeah, you did lose your hat. Or did you?
Yes.
I'm not 100% sure that happened. But that is not part of my report. The final item on my chairperson's report is along the same lines. I had a member of the community reach out about a third SRO. I know that's something we have touched on briefly, and the feasibility for personnel financially. So I just want to make sure that we investigate to see if that is something that we can support and do that our community needs. And that concludes the chairperson's report. So moving on to the chief's report.
That was an excellent report.
Thank you.
So for personnel related, we have been accepting applications through Police App since the beginning of May of this year to fill the 2 upcoming police officer vacancies. We are getting some applicants. As we've discussed in the past, there is basically a shortage of people who are interested in becoming police officers. And our numbers that are coming in are slowly getting up there, but they're not near where they have been in the past. We have conducted preliminary interviews, a written exam, and secondary interviews for the replacement of Mark Ridowitz for Animal Control Officer. And those secondary interviews included Mark himself, who was part of that process. So we're continuing to move forward with that. On May 16th, we implemented the traffic enforcement officer again with the primary function of traffic safety, which includes compliance through enforcement and education, as well as a focus on roadway signage, markings, design, line of sight issues, things like that. We have 2 officers who are still on medical leave for an extended period of time. They are doing fairly well. Hopefully we will see them back in service within the next month and a half or so. It seems like our regular monthly now report on motor vehicle thefts, an update of that. We are still at 3 thefts for the entire year, so we're hoping to maintain that. Keep in mind that last year it was not evenly distributed throughout the year. We had 4 last year up until April, and we had 2 more. So last year we had 6. Right now at this time frame we have 3 this year. So it's 50%, but it's also only a difference of 3. And I think we are seeing a decrease in thefts regionally. On to catalytic converters, we have not really seen a decrease in that. We are currently up to 33 catalytic converters that have been stolen from vehicles this calendar year. Over half of those from Hoffman Auto Park. When that was happening, January, February, March of this year, our midnight shift took a really aggressive approach, and they were designating an officer 4 hours at a time being down in that area, highly visible. And that seemed to have reduced the amount of thefts from there. But we continue to have them in small pockets throughout town. It's still a problem throughout our state.
Excuse me, the other half, they're from driveways, parking lots?
A combination. They're from driveways, they are from business parking lots, they're not from concentrated areas, they're kind of scattered all about.
How hard is it to steal one? You get into a car, right?
It's very easy. So there's some video on people walking around with jacks, and they jack it up, and 38 seconds later, the car is up. They use a Sawzall that is a battery operated Sawzall. They make 2 cuts, they take and they leave. Yeah. And then there are other vehicles where they can just go underneath without a jack. Some trucks, some vans, some school buses.
Could I ask that?
Absolutely.
So, funny enough, I was meeting someone on Facebook Marketplace at the Buckland Hills Mall during the day, 4:30 p.m. to sell something. And it's a guy I generally meet with around that time, tons of people, very busy. Out of the corner of my eye, I see 2 gentlemen dressed up, hoodies, masks, everything. They pull up to one car, they do something, don't know what it is. It caught my attention. But then next thing I know, maybe a minute later, they go on to another car on the other side of the lot. There's families walking right by them. And then from there, I hear the scraping. I hear the actual Sawzall. I hear them doing it. I look over, I see 2 guys, they saw me, they jacked the car up. It was a Honda, not even a bigger car that they could just slide under like we've been seeing. It must have been a minute flat. I saw them go from one car here. By the time they were at the second car, jacked it up, started cutting, it was probably a minute. And I immediately noticed and called 911 once I heard the scraping and saw what they were doing. They saw me look, so they immediately jumped in their car. You think that they would move on and just leave? They just went further down the lot. I was on the phone with Manchester PD trying to get a plate. Thing is, and we caution this extremely, don't approach them, don't try to stop them, because the majority of them are armed nowadays, and there have been instances where they fire. So if you can see a plate from a distance safely, that's fine, but don't go and actually try to intervene. But so they saw me drive around near them again and they took off. But at that point I had called Manchester, and then you figure maybe another 3-4 minutes before they get somebody in the area. So these guys are able to move extremely quick. Unless you have an officer, and even if there was an officer on the other side of the Buckland Hills Mall, by the time that they get the call from dispatch, drive over there, try to find the vehicle, these guys are already gone. It's amazing how fast they are.
Bears have been very active this year.
Yeah.
Yes. There were 6 reports of bears entering homes or garages in May alone. They gained access through windows or opened garage doors. They're obviously seeking out food. And then there was one report of a bear entering a chicken coop, and it killed some chickens and then left. So we've been working, as we always do, very closely with the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. We will give advice to people on how to make their home safe, how to not attract the bears, what they should do if they encounter a bear, see a bear. We will respond and try to move those bears along. We also encourage people to try to note anything specific about a bear, like that it was an extremely large bear or it was a bear with 2 small cubs, if there are markings or tags on the bear. So then we can report that activity to DEP, and if they deem the bear as a nuisance, then they can come and they can take some action. There has been a trap currently in town. I don't know if that trap is still there or not, or if they were able to capture one, but we're working closely with them.
If a homeowner refuses to heed the advice of putting or whatever,
Yeah.
and continues to have bears enter their home, is there any sort of fine or?
Yeah, so there's the intentional feeding wildlife town ordinance that we can enforce.
Okay, so people disregard various consequences to those actions.
Yes.
Right. Sorry.
So we had a couple recent events. The Memorial Day parades were a success. For the Terrifill parade, we had officers for traffic, and we had an honor guard for the cemetery ceremony. And for the Simsbury parade, we had officers for traffic. The administration and the honor guard marched, and then the honor guard participated in the ceremony at the Veterans Memorial.
Excuse me, is there any other alternative to snowplow with action blocking the streets? It just looks so patriotic,
Well, I think that it's besides using all the fire apparatus that would have to go and leave for an emergency, it's the largest vehicles that we have to try to provide as much protection for pedestrians as we can. Maybe we could decorate them.
I don't think so.
I'd entertain a motion if we wanted to create a decorating committee with Commissioner Long as our chair of decorating. Moving on.
June will likely be recognized by the Board of Selectmen this evening as Accessible Parking Awareness Month, formerly Handicap Parking Awareness Month. So through social media and compliance checks, we will be looking to prevent unlawful use of those spaces designated for accessible parking. The Junior Police Academy will be this summer from August 1st through August 5th, hosted here primarily at the police department. I believe the applications are still available on the town website, simsbury-ct.gov/police. The attendees are youth between 5th grade and 8th grade. The academy will help them with various different things. One is to demonstrate leadership qualities, develop learning, decision deduction, and analytic skills. They'll develop communication skills. They'll see what the police department does, what the fire department does, what the ambulance service does, understand the basic police investigative methods, And then just overall demonstrating respect for self and for others, being a good member of the community. It will be our 19th annual Junior Police Academy. We missed 2 due to the pandemic. So we are looking forward to it. It'll be the first year return. The senior picnic is scheduled for Wednesday, September 7th at Simsbury Farms. It's another collaborative effort by the police department, social services, and culture, parks, and recreation.
Is it senior citizens or high school? Like what type of senior are we referring to?
Old people.
Okay, I didn't know if it was a graduation. It's graduation season, I was confused.
No,
Okay.
it's in September. We just happen to have a date pretty early this year. It is for seniors in our community, and it's a great event. We were not able to have it because of the pandemic. Very much welcome to back. In the absence of an animal control officer, the department has maintained the services. One service is the annual survey that we have done for many, many years. It's a survey of homes to see if they have any dogs, to see if those dogs are licensed, and to see if they have rabies vaccinations. The survey requires door knocking on over 1,000 doors in town, and whether the person has dogs or not, just to inquire, and then we note that down and then we send it off to the Department of Agriculture. We are one of a handful of communities that continues to do that survey. It is labor intensive, both in the actual activity of walking around. We have seen a huge benefit because our animal control officer in particular has met a ton of people throughout the community. They have met him, and we have found that there have been dogs that are not licensed or dogs that do not have their current rabies vaccination. So we sort of accelerate that compliance. This year, without the animal control officer, we had Jamie Ball, our community services office, sort of lead that charge in getting that done. So we had some assistance from members of the patrol division, but we were able to accomplish it through Jamie Ball's efforts, the efforts of his supervisor, Sergeant J.P. Lassard, and then the oversight of Matt Christian, the professional standards. I remember that. That's all I have for my report.
I wonder if we could give some consideration that who's the major sponsor of the senior picnic? Us.
It is.
There's some consideration. The naming of it is the chief of Peter Anderson. I haven't seen you dancing quite as well as he did.
You will not. You will not.
That sounded like a challenge.
I'm not taking it as a challenge. I'm acquiescing. That's correct.
But it's just the thought.
I like your thought.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, then moving on to the next item on our agenda is the consolidated monthly report for April 2022. Yes, did anyone have any concerns? Notice our fingerprints went way down. Any just happenstance or specific?
Probably board of graduated.
Anybody else?
It doesn't follow the consolidated report, but it doesn't have its own separate item. At some point, we'll talk about the budget.
Yeah, I have that after this. I'm not sure yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Ah.
I didn't see it on here.
Well, it's up here. Preliminary monthly active report for May 2022. That's this one. Questions, thoughts, concerns? Can anyone remind us what PASS stands for, the actual abbreviation?
Police activity.
Simsbury schools? I know, I'm just gonna keep throwing that out every so often and see if we ever get it.
I'm trying to think if it's in an email.
Oh,
I'll
I
check
don't
it
know.
later.
I know every so often, I know I want it to be Simsbury schools and it's not. I don't remember what it is.
When you see that.
It's under PASS.
That is in Kent, though, it's our number of checks.
Yes, I know what
Out
it
of schools,
is, but I checked it because I was wondering if that went up after, recent events. Moving on to the next item, the year-to-date budget report. Any questions, Mr. Long?
No, I could actually read it. I appreciate that.
It is larger font.
The format change, yes,
Yeah.
I noticed that.
Yeah. But I was wondering what's happened here. I mean, it identifies the date on which this thing was went off, which is June 10th. But it doesn't necessarily tell us, what part of the year.
Or what time period.
Is that like through May 30th or is it through June 10th or?
Yes, through June 10th. So we have a fairly new financial system that we're working with, and we're trying to make it easier, and where we made it larger and took out some of the other information, looks like we may have missed some of that other, because I know that it said like the reporting period on there, but
Yeah.
it is through that grand date of June 10th.
It's also very helpful to have when we get percent used.
I guess that's the percent. Is the available budget used or the revised budget? I'm not sure what that is. And secondly, how that relates to the period of the year. The first item there is 93% used. But are we 98% through the year? Are we 85% through the year? What could be helpful to us would be knowing, how we're doing versus the time frame in which that budget
Sure.
covers.
So one is the percent used is the revised budget, because that doesn't change except there was an error in when they originally put an amount in back for the police overtime. So that's the only reason why that revised budget column has changed. And I understand what you're saying, because in the past we actually ran it not to an actual date, a random date when we ran it to that end of that month. So you can
Right.
tell exactly what percentage of that
11,
month
12,
was. But with that being said, throughout the year, it may or may not matter much, except for a couple of the line items, because some of them are not consistent throughout the year. The one that would be the full-time and the part-time salaries. Those should carry evenly throughout the year. So the percentages should match up to the percent used and the percent gone through the year, where the other ones don't, because they are distributed or expenses are taken from them at different times of the year. For instance, holiday pay, December and June. So what it may look like over or under at a certain time, it may be exactly the way that it should be. But as we get closer and closer to the end of the year, it's probably more valuable information.
Yes, particularly if there's, if there are overages in certain areas, or if there are underages on them. Because then there may be other things that those funds could be used for, not just evaporated at the end of the year. If for instance, the youth program, falls under, I don't know where it is here, but it falls under conferences and education. I don't know. But, and if there's a tremendous underusage in supplies somewhere else, perhaps those funds could be, before the end of the fiscal year, be transferred. Because if you get to the end of the year, then it's a formal process, et cetera, through the board of finances, et cetera. But I think there's the ability to do that in-house prior to the end of the year. If you look at it carefully. So I think it would be a relevant thing to do. If we can. Have a volunteer chairperson once a month to sit down and go through it.
I would love that. That would be fantastic.
And we could, the maximum pay for our buck.
The education rate reimbursement is for the officers who have paid to get reimbursed for their education, as opposed to like a conference or seminar. That would be conferences and education.
Correct. Yeah, and the reimbursement will in all likelihood be expended 100%. by the end of this month.
Because that was just 0, that was bigger. Okay,
That means it needs to be refunded for that much a year.
It is, yeah, all of these are, none of these carry over year to year, all of these.
Yeah.
All these will be either expended or if not, it'll be given
I
back.
understand. So if there's things that we need, that, you know, then we should probably do it before we get to that point. Anyway, okay.
okay.
You get that nailed down.
Stop it.
Sorry.
Do you want me to show?
No.
Moving on to the year-to-date budget report for dispatch, any questions there? Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, animal control, that's only 49%.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't had an animal control officer since the end of January.
Can you get a part-time one? Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions or concerns? All right, moving on to the next item on our agenda, new business, response to aggression policy revision. I'll turn that over to you.
So General Order 4-1, response to aggression or resistance was approved by the Police Commission and issued on November 9th, 2021. A copy of that is provided within this handout that you have. Besides the first paragraph of the order, the policy is identical to the state's policy. The Police Officer Standards and Training Council issued a general notice 22-04 on May 18th, 2022. Clarifying changes were made to the post-C use of force policy on when an incident needs to be submitted to the state, which is referenced on pages 9 through 11 of the revised policy. It's highlighted in red as well. It's printed in the document. Draft Order 4-1 is included within the printout and includes changes to the policy. And so there's really no changes, there are substantive changes other than when different reporting requirements. So for an incident where just force is used, so in any incident where a police officer uses physical force that's likely to cause serious physical injury to another person or death of another person, that would get submitted to the state and investigated by the state. Any actions resulting in or alleged to have resulted in injury to another person should be reported internally if there's just a more minor injury or just the use of force, I should say. So the use of force that goes to the department and reported internally. And any use of force reports that don't meet the state reporting requirements by statute but are required to be required by the policy are also stored in-house. So it's really just kind of clarifying what gets sent to the state, what gets housed and investigated internally as opposed to the state system.
Were these changes brought about by an incident in another town? Because typically when changes are made, something happens.
I don't know that it was brought about by another town from an incident, other than I think there was just a lot of confusion as far as what actually, I think maybe there was too much information getting sent to the state, and they said, we're not, people mischaracterizing or misinterpreting what the language said, so they're trying to clarify what the intent of the language was, and then trying to give that clarification to the towns so that they don't get inundated with too much information, but still get the information that they need. So.
And this just follows, our policy follows the changes proposed.
Correct.
Okay, I will ask for a motion. It's okay, go ahead.
And you said you had some input later in the year.
Yes. I believe they made those changes already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's under the reporting procedures for us internally. So this is verbatim to the state, and then we have what we do for our investigations. And that's what we handle those. And that didn't affect this one, or vice versa.
And we're missing a page.
The one's flipped over at 9 and 10, or I think it's just
Okay.
Let's just see if you're paying attention.
Pass.
Right now you're.
All right.
They're being ordered.
Okay, I don't get the right word. I will have a motion on the response to aggression policy revision.
So.
Second. Okay,
Yeah, so they.
yes. Do we have any further discussion? I would just like to say personally, I appreciated the 2 copies as a clerical matter that made it very easy for me, so thank you very much. Any other substantive discussion? Okay, in that case, I will call for a vote. All in favor of approving the post-it note, revised use to, I'm gonna ask you to type this in, there's a post-it note over. The response to aggression policy revision. You know what I'm trying to say? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Whew. That, well, I didn't realize it was a long time. Okay,
They did it.
Peanut gallery. Moving on to our next item on the agenda, missing persons presentation. I will turn it over.
Yep, so this evening, we have Officer Sam Robbins with us, and Sam has been with us since
March 30th of 2017.
Sam has accelerated quite quickly as a once new officer here. He's done a remarkable job, has been a field training officer, and we recently asked for anybody who wanted to do a presentation for the police commission. And I had nothing in mind for actual topics, but Officer Robbins and one of his supervisors, Sergeant Johnson, spent a lot of time thinking of what they wanted to present, and he was just very persistent, like, we're gonna come up with something. So we don't often see that people are just jumping to get in front of an audience and a camera, and Sam is here for us tonight on his own free will, and I'm very interested in presenting.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners, for having me here. Chief, for giving me the opportunity to come up and speak. So I wanted to talk a little bit about missing persons cases and touch on some of the points about that specifically, but then also some of the stuff that kind of goes in between that isn't really considered missing persons that a lot of people miss. So to start just off the bat with missing persons in general, so a missing person is any person who's reported missing to law enforcement agency until the person is located or determined to be voluntarily missing. Generally under the age of 18, but circumstances not conforming to his or her ordinary habits or behavior and may need assistance. So by and large, when you think missing persons, a lot of people tend to jump to the most serious part of it, which is children missing, silver alert, amber alert, somebody gets abducted. So that's some of the primary stuff with the missing persons, and it generally gets started because you have someone coming in, they make a concern, a complaint, an inquisition about a person who either they know or is directly related to them that they haven't been in contact with or is doing something kind of outside of their normal behavior. So everybody has their daily, routines that they stick to, but then sometimes obviously they get moved around, and for other people it can be concerning when these things happen. But you have someone come in, make the concern. Let's say for this instance, it's a 12-year-old who goes to, what grade is that? Henry James Middle School or so? You're gonna know that a lot better.
I got that one.
No kids yet. Let's say they normally come home right after school off the bus. They don't show up from school. Now the parent is concerned. We get a lot of these calls. My child is due to be back around 3. It's now 3:30, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. They're not here. So we'll talk to them. We'll go to the house. First things first, if they believe the person is missing, and let's say that the person is outright missing, they haven't heard from anybody, the first thing they're always going to want to do is go to the house directly, check the house, every facet of the house, everywhere where that person can fit, where they can hide, even if you think it's ridiculous, an attic, a basement, a cabinet space, underneath a bunch of papers, it could be anything. You're going to go through everything and make sure they're not there. But by and large, we're also going to be going to external factors. So they're coming home from the school. What are we going to do? Contact the school. Did they show up for class? Were they there for their classes? Did anybody see them? Friends, other family members that they might see, hang out with afterwards. Generally, we tend to find them in that sense, through the family and friends. Oh, they went over to Mark's house. That's where they've been. Sometimes they'll go there after school, sometimes they don't. They just didn't say anything. So that doesn't really classify as your missing person. And we're gonna take steps to kind of build up before we start going all hands on deck. Let's do a missing persons complaint. But let's say we've exhausted all those resources. We've talked to everybody at the school says he didn't show up for school. Family, friends, we get in touch with his best friend says he hasn't texted me all day, we haven't heard from him, we have no idea. Then you start to go into a little bit more of that investigation process with the questioning, has anything happened lately with this person that might make them want to feel like either they need to shut off from the outside world, their family, run away, harm themselves, things of that nature. So you start putting pieces together to see what it may be. We start getting those concerns. Now we might start looking a little bit further down the road for some of those missing persons type complaints. And if that is the case where, we really can't find anyone, we have FD coming out, we'll have them assist. Sometimes it's just someone gets lost on a path, and FD will come out and we'll search. Maybe we even call in a canine. But if this is a genuine, my son is missing, he ran away, we're not sure where he's going, what he's done. Now at this point, we're gonna kind of trigger that system that we have. We'll take statements, we'll have officers outside of the one who's the primary investigating one, who will go and search other areas in town that they may be at, parks, other schools, hangout spots, anything that we might find. We're gonna send it over the air through the emergency system through the hotline to surrounding agencies. Have them check key areas, parks, playgrounds, hangout spots, movie theaters, anything like that. And then past that, we'll start to send information and we will fax documents and forms to the state message center, where they will then take this information in, and everything has to meet a specific criteria. So if you break down the two big things for missing persons, and I said them both already, the first one is the silver alert. So for silver alert, generally we're talking about juveniles, kids under the age of 18. It's not illegal to be an adult and not want to talk to anybody. You guys decide, I've had enough of this, I'm gonna walk away, and you do it voluntarily, you have your car, we have no reason to believe that you're in any kind of exigent, danger. That's not illegal. We can't force you to come back, we can't, but let's say they're a juvenile, but then also adult persons who might have a mental or physical disability or impairment. That's something we're gonna factor to in as well. But then also for the silver alerts, it will apply to over the age of 65. So it could be people that are starting to get onset of dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, things of these degrees, where they still drive, maybe they don't have like a real diagnosis. So they still go out and live their lives, the family's trying to figure it out, but they get lost when they drive. Next thing you know, they're in a different state, they're in a different town. This happens very, very often enough, unfortunately. Thankfully, most of them find their way back, and it's usually not too far away. But you would you'd do the statement, you'd fax the information, the paperwork to the Connecticut Message Center, and then what happens is we have two systems that we abide by. You guys might have heard of these, the collect system, which is in-state, and then you have the NCIC, which is the national. The actual definitions of them, so that I don't botch these acronyms. We'll come back to it. But regardless,
There will be a test on this, like pass or
God, it's
NCIC.
Connecticut telecommunications, teleprocessing. But regardless, so essentially what happens is when you're doing something just in state, it goes through collect, which is what we use to identify the majority of people through their licensing, their registrations. All that information is stored there and is accessible to all Connecticut law enforcement. So when we do motor vehicle stops, when we have investigations where we need to see somebody's license, things of that nature, we check the op number on the license, the registration number on the back of the plate. We can send that to our dispatchers who run it through the collect system, and then it'll give us the information. The person who owns it, where they live, their name, date of birth, all that kind of a thing. So we are going to send a notification out into the system, into the collect system, and it's going to put an alert, a file 6 missing persons alert, on this person that we're trying to find. So if they have any run-in with any law enforcement where they would need to identify themselves with a name, date of birth, or their license number, or their vehicle registration, and it could be from any kind of interaction, a car stop, or maybe they go and ask for help. But if an officer identifies them somewhere in Connecticut, it's gonna pop up on our computers in our car, file 6, missing person. And then they're gonna know that this person is missing. They're gonna call the originating department to confirm what's going on. Why are they missing? What are the circumstances? And then from there, that information will get relayed back to us, and then we can then tell the parents, the family, the friends, whoever's calling it in. Now, if it needs to go broader, so we did Silver Alert. Now, the big difference between the Silver and the Amber is that the Amber has other extenuating circumstances generally linked to a person's safety, security, and the risk of having that danger or death to that extent. So the Amber Alert would be more geared towards your abductions, or it could be domestic related issues, boyfriend, girlfriends, partners, siblings. It could be anything to that extent. But if there's something more broader that requires a more kind of criminal investigation with it, now we send out the Amber Alert. And so there's other resources too that can be used with these. So the Amber Alert's going to go nationally. That's going to go across the country. So all that information is readily available so that if anything comes up, officers across the country should be able to see this license from this person, they should be able to see that there's an Amber Alert and that they are missing. And then they can contact the originating department again, come back and do that. So the big difference being the Silver Alert is more just maybe someone runs away, maybe someone gets lost. The Amber is for the more serious things that have the criminality aspect to it. Now, there are different resources that we have, different phone numbers, hotlines that we will reach out to where we can put out notifications, whether online, throwing pictures up, or also sending notifications to phones. You guys may have at some point in your lives received a text message where it says, John Doe, 19 years old, or not 19, but 16, whatever it may be, missing out of wherever, last seen earlier today. It might have a description of the person. In some instances, they could send pictures if they have something to use, and then that will be broadcasted to the area where they think it'll be the greatest effect. I know I received one recently. I live in Enfield, and I received one for a young girl who was a high school student nearby. Can't remember if it was out of Suffield or not, but that was a Silver Alert, I believe. But so there's your big differences. But then we also have other capabilities too outside of the missing persons, which we'll utilize if we don't go all the way to the missing persons portion of it. We can ping phones, which generally we'll do for emergency situations. So all of you guys have a phone, there's a carrier to that phone, Verizon, AT&T, whoever it may be. Those are the two big ones, and they generally umbrella over all the smaller ones too. So what you'll do is we have the dispatcher who will send in a form to Verizon, AT&T, and it will explain the number that we have, why we want the ping done, and it has to be related to those exigent emergency circumstances. So this person's missing and they made a threat of violence against themselves. This person is threatening suicide. This person has been depressed lately. It can also be used for criminal investigations as well, because I've used it recently. I can't get into details, obviously, but a threatening text message was made to a female party. They were spouses. And what happened was he made it like something that basically led us to believe that there was an imminent danger for that person. So we were able to express that in the form that we sent to the company, and they were able to ping it and find this person in a town not 30 miles away from here. We then call that police department. They're able to go check the area, they find him, and then they take him into custody. So there's a lot of ways we can use it, and that's not even necessarily bringing about the missing persons aspect of it. So you'd say you get someone who's lost out in the parks or in one of the trails, and we have a ton of them. They have a phone on them, they get lost, they have no idea where they are. Their family calls, it's 9 o'clock at night now. We want to get an idea. Now, it's not exact. It's not going to tell us literally you're sitting in that chair right there. It's going to give us an approximation. But it at least gives us a sense of direction to start utilizing other resources like the FD with their ATVs or dogs, whatever it may be.
Question. I never have signal when I go out hiking. Can they still find me?
So what it'll do is it'll ping off the last time your phone actually used a satellite.
Gotcha.
So wherever that originated from. So even if generally you want the person's phone to be on, if the person's phone's on, it's going to update about every 10, 15 minutes. And that's how updated will be, is every 10, 15 minutes they will say, at this time, they were approximately in this area. But then obviously it's a delay. You have your 15-minute delay. So now we have to try to work with that and see, does it change? Does it stay the same? But if someone shuts off their phone, you're not going to get any new updates on that, but you are going to see the last time that it actually pinged a tower or the satellite or wherever its last known location off of the phone was. You're going to get that. And I'd imagine that would also apply to if you don't have service. same kind of thing.
My one's not, it's a brick, but that's not.
It happens. So I mean, we do utilize the ping pretty often. It's pretty standard protocol, and it has helped us a lot with getting just a general area of where to find someone. But then we also have other circumstances, like I said, you have the elderly, someone who's maybe in their 80s that has dementia, and we have the Project Lifesaver program, which is separate from all that entirely. But essentially, if you sign up for the Project Lifesaver, you're given a band, you're given a frequency number that is specific to the band, and then we have equipment that will actually use, I believe it's radio waves. And what happens is it will give us a ping, essentially like a noise, to give us a general direction. So we need to be within a certain range. It's more like, gentleman in his house goes for a walk on the bike path, and he might be within like a mile radius. It's not for we're standing here trying to find someone in Canton. But then there's other things we can utilize to pass that. I know Avon has a drone, so that is something that can be utilized. We have reached out to them before to have them bring the drone out, and that's something that's very good, especially with the terrain that we have in Simsbury with the mountains and whatnot. I'm not sure the distance on their drones, but you're talking about something that can obviously go pretty high vertically, but then move horizontally and every direction you need to, and it's very small and compact. So that's something that can be utilized too. Then you also have your canines, where you call someone in, you get them to hit on a scent. You get a tracking canine specifically meant for that. You give them a piece of the person's clothes, or let's say you have a vehicle parked out by Talcott Mountain. They can smell the vehicle, smell what's around it, and then they will be on the trail to find them. And so then we'll utilize that as well. So I mean, those are all things that we use separately that are not necessarily, putting it in as a missing person. And then another one that we utilize pretty often is, so just like missing persons is considered a code file 6, we have an attempt to locate, which is a code 24. So not really to the same extent of a missing person, more like this is a person, I'm concerned for their well-being, I just want to make sure that they're checked on and their welfare is checked to make sure that they're in a good state of mind or that they're okay. So we put those out a lot, especially when you have like a suicidal person who, just expresses like, I don't have any will to live, that sort of thing, and they're not home, they don't know where they are. We can utilize the ping and whatnot, but separately we'll also do a file 24 attempt to locate, which is similar to the file 6 missing person in that we are going to mark and notify their information for the collect database. So that way, when someone searches them, the license plate, the license number on their driver's license, collect will again pop a notification. It'll be in red, file 24. The officer will know this is a person that department is looking for, and then they will reach out to that department to let them know. And those are, again, more like welfare checks. And so if the department that finds the person comes across and they say, well, he's fine, we interviewed him, he's expressed no wants to harm himself, anybody else, he's expressed that he's doing great, he just needs to get some air, just wanted to go for a drive, then there's not much we're going to do aside from just take that information from the police department and update the person that asked for that initial attempt to locate. So a little bit less on that kind of, that ascending list of things that you can do, but it is something that we utilize very often. And then just below that at the bottom, we get a lot of calls for just welfare checks in general. So, you constantly will have us getting a call from someone saying, I haven't heard from my uncle, my aunt, my cousin, whoever, my mom, my dad. They normally text me at 5 o'clock every single day. Today they didn't say anything. So what we'll do is we'll go out to the residents, we'll try to make contact. Most of the time we do, then we can get them to call that person and then everything's okay. But then you have issues where maybe the person had a medical emergency, and in those cases, if we have reason to believe that that is the case, then we'll force entry into an apartment, a house to check on their welfare. But just some different things along the line. I mean, missing person is the big one that everyone kind of knows, but there's a lot of steps in between from start to finish that go into it. And not every single case is going to warrant a missing persons kind of response. But we're going to take steps anywhere from, the welfare check to calling the FD, to drones, to missing persons, amber alerts, silver alerts, all that.
Officer Robbins, great presentation. I learned some things. I thought silver was just for us old folks.
That's what I thought. I thought
I didn't
Amber was
realize
good,
it.
Silver was old.
Yeah, that's.
Exactly.
So thank you very much for the information.
That was I do have another question.
Sure, ask away.
Because I watch TV. There's no time limit on which a person must be missing before.
Yeah, so I mean, You know, with
24
the
hours?
NCIC, your honor rescue and all that. No. If you come in and, I mean, obviously, again, we're gonna take certain steps to get to that point. It's not just you come in and say, my son's been missing for an hour, I need a missing persons thing, this is what we're gonna do. There's gonna be steps we take before we get there. But no, there's no time frame. You come in and if that is the case and we have reason to believe they're missing, we're sending it out ASAP.
Thank you, I agree with you, I just learned a whole bunch.
Good. Any other questions?
All right.
That's great, thank you very much.
Of course.
It can often be an extremely emotional thing if a parent is obviously missing a child. And we can probably all attest to times where we've gone to somebody's house looking for their missing person and they are there and they just could not have seen them. I remember one in particular, probably a good 15 years ago, and the young child was sleeping on the couch and the woman walked by so many times underneath blankets. And it just happens because you get so worried and nervous, so it's always the first place that we thoroughly check. Even if a parent or caregiver says, you've checked the home, we're gonna check the home.
I have a kid that likes to hide like that, so I can appreciate that.
Yeah, and talk to your children too. I mean, the big thing is like, where do they like to go when they're stressed or when, something's up and they just want to be alone? Every kid has kind of their spots, whether it's in the house or somewhere nearby, like a tree house or at their friend's house a few doors down. Every kid has them. Try to get that verbal judo in there to get them to say what it is. So that way, when these things do happen, you guys can give that information to the police and say, well, I know they like to go here, there, this and that. Gives us more to go with.
Excellent presentation.
So I was looking through this and I noticed that they're not on here. Is that because we don't ever really get them?
On which one are you looking for?
Just, I looked through actually both of them, so maybe I could have.
Yeah, no, so it wouldn't pop up on the current monthly one unless there actually was a missing person. So that one, that one doesn't have all of them. And the other one, consolidated monthly one, it would only be in the other activity on page 2, the miscellaneous.
Okay.
And I would say that it's extremely rare.
Okay. That's good.
In most cases, it's as Officer Robinson explained, like within a short amount of time, the person's located.
Any other questions, discussion, thoughts?
None from me, thank you.
All right, in that case, I will move to the final item on our agenda, adjournment.
I'd like to move that we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I adjourn this meeting at 6:05 PM.